And I think the Pope needs to reflect on what's going on here. He's being given a fraternal correction by his brother bishops and many other Catholics that immorality cannot be blessed.
Father Gerald Murray from the World Over Live Papal Posse is here to react to Fiducia Supplicans, the pushback from the African bishops that is leading the charge from around the world, and what we might expect is the next shoe to drop in the church. It's all coming up next. By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
The reason why the bishops of Africa say that, the reason is they reject it as contrary to Catholic teaching. So is the Pope now saying the bishops of Africa are right? He did say that in an interview that the bishops in Africa have a different culture and sensibility. They're not doing this because this is an African culture issue, or they have, a very sensitive emotional view of life that can't handle this. No, they're saying we're not going to do this because it contradicts the faith of the church. So I'm glad the bishops in Africa did that. And I think the Pope needs to reflect on what's going on here. He's being given a fraternal correction by his brother bishops and many other Catholics that immorality cannot be blessed.
When it comes to the African bishops and their statement, that really caught me. They seem to be offering this very nuanced position, as you just stated. Well, our culture, our situation. Oh, are you seeming to indicate then that, say, if a different culture had a different way, a situation, then therefore it'd be okay there, just not here? That seems like, although I applaud the African bishops for speaking out, that also seems very hypocritical in some ways. It's either true or it's not true. It's true either in Africa and it's true in Texas, or it's not true in both. It seems like a very nuanced position. Was that just so that they could make their statement without seeming like they're really going against Pope Francis?
Well, I think they're trying to soften their blow that they're giving to the Pope when saying no. That's really contradicting the Pope to his face is kind of shocking. But we have to remember a couple of things when they say it's against our culture. Well, the culture of Africa now is largely formed by Christianity. Christianity has grown tremendously in Africa in the last 50 years. And that culture, let's say there's a native culture before Christianity arrives that rejects homosexuality. Well, that's a precursor to the gospel, and the gospel confirms it. For me, the best statement I've read so far came from the bishops of Cameroon. And they specifically cited the scriptural basis of the rejection of the blessing of homosexual couples. So, let's put it this way. What is important in this issue is that we realize the church is subject to Jesus Christ and his revelation. And any innovation which ignores or contradicts that revelation has to be rejected. And the bishops of Africa have done that.
How strong of a statement was Cardinal Sarah's letter, his Christmas letter, the interview that he did? Some people are saying he was accusing His Holiness of teaching heresy. Was he doing that? What was he saying?
He's saying that the document Fiducia Supplicans contains heretical teaching. And that is a statement on what is said in the document. Now, is somebody guilty of heresy? That's a canonical question when it comes to responsibility for what they're teaching. The Pope may think, and apparently he does, that everything in Fiducia Supplicans is in accord with Catholic teaching. He's mistaken if that's what he thinks. So therefore, the question becomes, how do we make a fraternal correction about the error that's contained in Fiducia Supplicans? And, respect to the leader of the Catholic Church on earth, the Pope, would demand that we clearly identify the mistake and then give him an opportunity to explain why it's not a mistake or why he's going to alter it. If he says that the bishops of Africa no longer have to, implement this teaching, then can he really say that this is a teaching that requires the assent of all Catholics around the world? He can't say that. Now, the Pope is not a canon lawyer, and he certainly doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about the canonical implications of what he does. I mean, just think about the removal of Bishop Strickland. That was in violation of the established canonical order. So when we go to the Pope, as Cardinal Sarah's done, it's respectful, but it's forceful. And it's very sad because this is in line with something the Pope said earlier in an interview where he said there should be civil unions for homosexuals. He said homosexuals can't get married, of course, but the state should issue civil unions. And I objected to that at the time, as did many. The implication of that is that homosexuals have a right to commit sodomy, and the state should recognize that as a basis of a civil status. That presumption is wrong. Well, we said that at the time. I see the same presumption here. Two Catholic homosexuals who commit sodomy with each other deserve a blessing because somehow the act of sodomy establishes them as a couple. The church has never said that. Sodomy is not like marital consummation of a marriage. It's not an act according to God's plan and nature. Therefore, it's an act that harms God's creation and certainly harms the souls that commit it.
Wow. Now, Cardinal Fernandez, His Eminence, did issue the clarification, and then there's been hints and rumors about a forthcoming document that will be very critical of gender ideology, same-sex unions, etc. Is this like are they wanting their cake and eat it too? Are they trying to play both sides?
It's very hard to understand what's going on in Rome right now. For instance, or I guess it was early December, we got a document that said transsexuals can be godparents. So a man who dresses like a woman can show up and say, I'm the godmother. Wait a minute. That's insane. Catholic Church doesn't agree with that. Then we get Fiducia Supplicans, which basically says there's something called a pastoral blessing, which is not a liturgical or ritual blessing. No one's ever heard of this. They base it by saying there's a directory of popular piety, and this is an expression of popular piety. Priestly blessings do not fall in the category of popular piety, like pilgrimages and the like. So they claim there's something new, therefore don't be upset because it's not a liturgical blessing, as if that should console us. When a priest blesses, the form is a secondary question. Then they say there's no endorsement of the lifestyle of the people who seek the blessing. You can't say that with a straight face. Once you say a couple is blessable, you've made a value judgment that, number one, they are a couple, and that what constitutes them as a couple is not so offensive that God will favor it. So that's all double talk. And then they also said, don't expect any further details or clarification. 2 weeks later, they issue a 5-page document, which is full of contradictions. And it is a lame attempt to claim that, don't be upset, folks, everything is normal. You're just not understanding what we're writing here. So, in fact, the explanation document, it's called a press release, which I'll just note as a canon lawyer. Press releases have no doctrinal value in the hierarchy of Holy See publications. The Holy See doesn't issue press releases in order to teach a doctrine that's being contested. But back to the point I was going to make, he says you need to read this document calmly, implying that those who object to it have either not read it completely or were so emotionally upset they couldn't possibly understand what its meaning is. That's patronizing. And that's basically a political way of looking at it. Folks, I'm your leader. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. If you don't understand, stand by. It's your problem. We'll try to explain it again a second time. Just calm down. That's bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I read the document and it's pretty clear. It intends to bless couples in irregular unions. But then I asked the question, who gets to decide the limit of that, Father? The document doesn't specify or define necessarily what the limits are of irregular unions. If a woman shows up with her pet dog and she claims she's in love and they're in a relationship, do they get a blessing? I mean, a brother and sister, a man and his daughter, a woman and a tree, all of which have been in the headlines just fairly recently of similar situations, might show up and ask for such a blessing. The document would suggest that they would have to give it.
Yeah, the document lacks seriousness because it never defines what irregular couples in irregular situations are. It never defines what same-sex couples are actually doing. Same-sex couples is a euphemism for saying homosexuals who are engaged in sodomy with each other following some form of commitment to remain together. Irregular couples mean people who commit adultery. That's what they're implying based on the context. But as I said at the time, wait a minute, they forgot about the polygamists, people who have 5 wives, and that exists in this world. Are they entitled to a blessing of their, not their union, but their coupledom, let's say. And that's
Yeah.
another dodge. We're blessing couples, not unions. That's impossible. A couple is defined by the fact that they're united through some promise or intention. So the whole thing is an exercise in propaganda, and what lies behind it is a view that the homosexual lifestyle is not something to be avoided and gotten out of, but something that God can bless. Even though it's not perfect, it's nonetheless, we have to bless it. No, I've worked with courage and apostolate that's faithful to the church. People who are enmeshed in sin of this sort, they need the liberation of the gospel and the
Mhm.
assurance that problems in life are not an obstacle to God if you turn away from sin.
So you mentioned courage. There's a report out this morning. I think Anthony Stein reporting this. That Courage has basically said they're going along with fiducia supplicans. I don't know that that's true. It's a report that's being talked about in the chat box here right now. If that were true, what would you say to Courage in this case? I mean, Courage is an organization that has helped many people who have struggled with same-sex attractions. Wouldn't this be a dangerous thing for them to implement?
Well, actually, Courage did issue a letter to people on their mailing list, their email list, which I got. And I was very disappointed. I was shocked, actually, because the letter said basically, folks, calm down, read the letter. It's similar to what Cardinal Fernandez said in his press release. And, Courage is dedicated to supporting the teaching of the church about chastity and how to live a chaste life when dealing with the problem of homosexual temptation. So I thought the letter was not good. I hope Courage will, take that back and then issue clear guidance and clarification, because, we don't live in a church in which we say basically, I don't understand Catholicism until I get a letter from the Pope or his assistants, and then they'll explain to me what I'm supposed to believe in. No, we believe in what we're taught, and if the Pope and his assistants say something that's inconsistent or contradictory, then we don't say, bravo, we have to change the way we think. No, we say, Holy Father, Cardinal Fernandez, you've made a mistake here. You need to withdraw this teaching. And guess what? It worked for the Africans. It has been withdrawn. So
Mm.
we're in a real period of chaos when, what's good in Europe is bad in Africa. No, that's not how Catholicism works.
77%, according to new Gallup poll, Father Murray, 77% of U.S. Catholics think Pope Francis is doing a great job. 58% of Americans, according to the Gallup poll, believe Pope Francis is doing a great job. He's edged out Benedict XVI. I guess a majority of American Catholics didn't think Benedict XVI did all that great. But at the peak of Pope Francis's popularity, which was in the 80 percentile range, he almost matches and beats JP2 at his peak. What does that say about America, given the fact that we've had going on 11 years of one scandal after another?
Well, I would say the more important statistic has to be people who actually go to Mass every Sunday. What do they think about what's been going on in the pontificate? Because the fact that you're a baptized Catholic, but that could mean people have not gone to Mass in years. People don't understand the religion. People who don't pay attention to what's going on in the church because they're not interested in religion. So those things, and there's a natural Catholic sentiment, which I share, which is to say, of course, I support the Pope. Of course, I pray for him. Of course, I think he's leading the church in a way that's good. So that's the default reaction, and thank God it is. But what really counts when it comes to interpreting what's going on is people are paying attention and know what's happening. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction. In fact, we know it because the Pope has criticized the Catholic Church in America for dissatisfaction expressed. And I would say, no, Holy Father, that's, again, a fraternal correction being given by people who know the faith and can understand why these innovations are coming and what's the purpose and meaning of them.
I think it's a canary in the coal mine to just about how bad things really are within the church today, especially here in America, where we would have more concern and care about what our political parties and their platforms state and how we should look at the world versus the Catholic faith.
I think that's a reflection of the decline in mass attendance and sacramental practice. Uh, we have, and this is sad to say, the post-Vatican II maelstrom in the church has produced a couple of generations now of poorly instructed Catholics. They don't know what the religion is. They don't know what it teaches. They have a general notion, obviously, because Catholic teaching is embraced by many, and there's a cultural support of it. So, they know Catholics are supposed to get married in church, baptize their children, go to confession. They know you're supposed to obey the Ten Commandments. But do they really believe that all of that is more than just a cultural inheritance? Is it something that makes a demand on their life? And that's where, I praise you and all the Catholic media who get the message out in these new ways. The internet is one of the best catechesis methods we have nowadays because it's free and people can access what they want quickly. They're not coming to church on Sunday in the way they did. Consider mass attendance statistics between 1960 and 2020. In 60 years, we've had like a 75% decline in the number of people going to church on Sunday. If you lost 75% of your market share, would you say that your product is appreciated and well?
No.
Of course not. People are ignoring your product. So we have to use these new methods to get people back in church. And I hope
But
I have great hope in God's grace, but we have to get moving on this.
it's becoming harder and harder, Father. I mean, just think about how many court cases we might be reading about in the next year because some Catholic somewhere, maybe a priest, refused to give such a blessing, and then now they're dragged into court, and they're going to say it's against my religious, conscience, and my religious beliefs to endorse same-sex unions, and the judge and the prosecutor, they're going to say, but your Pope said otherwise, and the document says otherwise. What then? So I think in that environment, I think we're going to see more difficult days. How many seminarians are going to rethink and go, I don't really want to be dragged into a court someday, and I just want to be a priest. I don't want to deal with all this stuff. And then how many people, our friends, our family at the Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner tables are going to go, what's going on with your Pope? The effort to share the good, the true, and the beautiful, I would say there's probably been a time not as good as this one in the sense that there is so much to be shared in a world that desperately needs it. And yet I also believe it's going to become even harder in the days to come to convince people of that truth given these circumstances. What do you think?
Well, you raise a good point, and I'll shift it from the secular courts to the diocese. The Archbishop of Madrid, who's now a cardinal, Cardinal Cobo, you may have heard that in Spain, a group of priests signed a document saying, we're not going to do this. Well, Cardinal Cobo reacted and said, priests in my diocese have to do this. Now, wait a minute. Are you saying that something that the church never allowed until essentially 10 minutes ago is now the determinant of what my priestly life in the diocese is? I have to obey this? If bishops are adamant about that and say priests who don't do it are going to be punished, I see a lot of priests are going to say, okay, I'm changing diocese, I'm moving. And they can say to Cardinal Cobo, now, why is it that if I cross the Mediterranean and go to Africa, my bishop will punish me if I do this? You're telling me if I don't do it, you're going to punish me. This is chaos in the church. We can't have this. But this is the fruit of when you do something which is manifestly against the Catholic faith. That's the real sadness, that the Pope and Cardinal Fernandez don't recognize it. In what world do we live in that we think Jesus Christ, if two homosexuals came up to him and said, our dear Savior, we don't accept your teaching that sodomy is wrong. We'd like you to bless us. And the Lord is going to say, okay, I think that's fine. Nobody in the history of the world would ever say that. But now
Right.
we're supposed to say the equivalent when a priest of Christ is approached by two homosexuals, say, you have to bless my relationship.
What do you think is the chance that because of the worldwide pushback, I mean, there's been a lot of bishops that would normally remain very quiet, very under the radar, just kind of doing their thing. they're having to make these statements. They're having to make a choice. They're coming out in one way or the other with that kind of reaction that we haven't seen since Humani Vitae. What are the chances that the Vatican rolls this back?
Well, my crystal ball, I don't believe in crystal balls, and it's not working. But no, there's no way I can tell the future. All I know is we have to be like St. Thomas More when he's dragged before the trial there for King Henry VIII.
Yeah.
We stick with what we know to be the truth, no matter who's telling us to do otherwise. So in fact, the Holy See has pulled back on this as regards Africa. So I basically would say any Episcopal conference that is, wants to do what the Africans have done, you've got an open door because if it works in Africa, why can't it work in Asia? The answer is it can work in both places. Now, the practical problem is going to be that the people who like this thing are going to push back against any weakening of it. So there's going to be a battle. And even beyond that, there's the theological problem, because the principles that underlie the reasoning here will undermine Catholic teaching in other areas. If you're saying God doesn't expect us to avoid mortal sin in order for the church to bless and favor your behavior, well, then there are plenty of other people who are going to say, well, I want in on that. I want to be able to do what I'm doing, which the church says is wrong, but nonetheless have a priest stand up somewhere and bless me in what I'm doing. So, I go back to the polygamists. Is polygamy so horrible that we could never bless it? That seems to be the implication because they never put that in this document. That's, again, an example of the faulty nature of this document. If you're going to talk about blessing people engaged in sexual immorality, why do you only pick two categories of people? What about incest? There are people who promote incest. It's horrible, but there are people out there who do it. Same with polygamy. So we're in a terrible mess created by the Holy See, and we have to tell them, don't continue down this path, which is wrong. Pull back, reaffirm the teaching. And then the good news, I'll say this again, the happiest news you can give to people who are committing sexual immorality is you are a prisoner of your own bad decisions. Jesus Christ will forgive your sin if you're repentant, and you will find true happiness in friendship, not in immoral unions.
Amen. Well said. Okay, so maybe the crystal balls for the future is hard to get it to working, but could we say that if we're experiencing Fiducia Supplicans now, what can we expect in October with the second round of the Synod on Synodality?
Again, well, the crystal ball is not working, but I'll say this. No, I'll say this. The document Fiducia Supplicans was under study and preparation in the Holy See while the Synod was going on. They never told the Synod fathers and mothers, turns out this time, that they were doing it. So they were not being upfront and honest, saying, why would you want to discuss homosexual blessings at the Synod? We've already decided that that's what we're going to do. Then they would, remember, it was withdrawn. The idea about some kind of homosexual statement was withdrawn from the final report. Well, was it withdrawn because the Holy See said, well, we're going to be putting out our own document? So synodality has been dealt a very serious body blow by the people promoting it, because they say we want a church of listening and consensus. But then when people at the Synod say, we don't want to favor homosexuality, and they drop it from the document, then they issue it on their own. So, yeah, again, synodality is another big problem because it's not based on the history and tradition of the church in the proper sense. It's basically a democratization of, the way the church operates. But how would the people of the Synod feel knowing this document now that came out in December, saying, wait a minute, why do we spend a month in Rome talking about various topics when you're going to issue documents on your own and you're not going to tell us you're going to do it? So, again, a big problem.
A huge problem. Last question. So we're being told by many people that you're not allowed to comment or criticize His Holiness. And when the Pope hopes that hell is empty, who are you to suggest and to criticize him for that? I mean, I'd put out a whole video on that very subject. What would be your response to the hope for hell being empty?
Uh, I don't know why you would hope for something that contradicts what Jesus himself said. The Lord didn't say that, the Lord said people go to hell because of their evil acts. The sheep and the goat, the separation of sheep and the goats is not a theoretical possibility. It's an actual outcome based on how people live. The church
Mm.
has never taught that hell is empty. The church has never taught that hell is sort of like an image and a figure and an analogy to scare people. No, hell is a reality. If there is no hell, and I have to go watch your video, but if there is no hell, then why have a church? Because if everyone gets to heaven, why go through all this rigmarole? So we can talk
I
about
think
that at another
I
time.
think some people are saying, but what's the harm in hoping that hell is empty? And I guess my response is, I don't see the point in hoping for something that's an impossibility.
Yeah, Phil Lawler wrote, I hope that there's $10 million in my bank account.
That's right.
I like to think that there is.
That's right.
Okay, but get back to reality. The
Yeah,
money's not there.
the money's not coming. Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.